Welcome to Legacy Engineered, the show where smart structure meets lasting success. Join Scott Arden, Chairman and CEO of Controllers Limited, as he sits down with business leaders, top entrepreneurs, and experts to uncover the strategies, stories, and structures that build lasting legacies. And now, here's your host, Scott Arden.
Welcome back to Legacy Engineered. I'm your host, Scott Arden. Today's guest is someone who challenges the way people think about business, wealth, and what success actually is supposed to look like. Chris Jarvis is an entrepreneur, financial strategist, and founder of Be the Giraffe, a philosophy built around seeing what others don't and reaching where others won't. Over the past 3 decades, he's worked with high-level entrepreneurs, family offices, and even billionaire families to help them build, protect, and transfer meaningful wealth. But what makes Chris different is that his work isn't just about money. It's about perspective. It's about rethinking how we approach business, life, and legacy altogether. Chris, welcome to Legacy Engineered.
Thank you so much, Scott. I'm so excited to have this conversation, and it's going to be a blast.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, cool. So, I got to ask you, I see the Be the Giraffe in the back there. I see it on your shirt. Where did the idea of Be the Giraffe come from?
So, like a lot of entrepreneurs, I've had more losses than wins. And if I go back 15 years, I can remember getting kicked out of a company that I started. And as I was licking my wounds, I was starting to think maybe I have lost it. Maybe I don't have my fastball anymore. And I'm not sure I have anything. So I went on this journey to talk to my clients and said, I think I know what I do. And I think I know what value I create. But let me go back to the people I've worked with and ask them the candid question. What was it like working with me? What did you get from me? You're just trying to get it from them, because I had gone through a personal divorce. I had gone through a business divorce. I was broke, bordering on homeless, and I'm sitting there, I was making $750,000 a year, and then all of a sudden I had nothing. And so I was wondering, like, who the hell am I? And who am I? I mean, I started questioning all the things that I thought as a 40, whatever I was at the time, 41-year-old man. And when I asked people, what is it like working with me? They'd give me some positive feedback. And then I'd say, no, like, what did you get out of it though? What was it? And what became clear from almost everybody was that they didn't say you saved me a lot of money. They didn't say you made me a lot of money. They didn't get into specifics. They said, when I get done talking to you, I always see things differently. I get a different perspective. You have a way of asking questions. You have a way of getting me to think about things differently. And, I asked, well, is that disruptive? And they said, God, yeah, it's very disruptive. I said, okay, is it disruptive in a bad way? And they said, at first it seems disruptive in a bad way. But as I would stop and think about the questions you asked, I realized that the things in my life, most entrepreneurs, the business is not separate from them as an individual. Their identity is tied up in the business they created. Their wealth is tied up in the business. So this money, business, life trifecta, it's not really like 3 legs of a stool. It's more like intertwined vines that are kind of growing together. They're hard to pull apart. And so people said, you ask the important questions that get me to think differently about stuff. And so when I started thinking about perspective and sight, I went on a journey to think about animals and, okay, like, what's the logo? I'm big into logos, and I'm big into metaphors, and big into analogies. And the more I looked at the giraffe, obviously it's tall, so it has a different perspective. While every other vegetarian on the savannah is eating weeds, like literally head in the weeds, because that's what they eat. The giraffe eats from trees. So as a result, while it's eating 18 hours a day, it can survey the horizon and see what's coming. And it just has a little more vision, a little more strategy. And I know my personality tests, I'm strategy first, strategy, visionary, futurist. Those are the kinds of things that come up. It just made sense. And then there were 14 unique stories about a giraffe that made up the Be the Giraffe book, which became a bestseller, led to a TV show. It was one of those metaphors, branding pieces that I'd like to say that I engineered it, but I feel like it was a gift, and it just made sense. And the more I learned about the giraffe, the more, the giraffe can see what others can't, reach what others won't, what you mentioned in the intro. And it's not a herd animal, so it's not migratory in that it follows a predictable pattern, like it would be if you were working for the man or showing up to your 9 to 5. Entrepreneurs, the job is whatever the hell it awaits you when you get up in the morning. So right, like it's all unintended consequences, and it's all fire drills. And so it just seemed to fit, this whole giraffe, sticking your neck out, being vulnerable, going places other people won't, and seeing things in a different way. It just lands so well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate those, what are they, the analogies or the metaphor, I love that. And, exactly what you said, being able to kind of see beyond or above what everybody else from a different perspective. And so, from that different perspective, I mean, what does that actually mean in practice, if you will, seeing differently?
I think it starts with you have to know where you are. I think there's two things. If you're asking for directions, to get directions or direction in life, there are two things you have to know. One, you've got to know where you're going, but you also need to know where the hell are you starting? Because if you're asking for directions to Lake Tahoe, well, if you're in Reno, it may not be that difficult, but if you're coming from Vegas, or you're coming from Henderson, or you're coming from the Bay Area, or you're coming from Bangladesh, like you need to have some idea where you're going. And so it all starts with self-assessment. So right. During COVID, I built something called the Wild Factor, which is a 5-minute quiz and assessment, test, introspection, whatever word you want to use. And it helps you measure your life on health, finances, career, relationships, and fun. And it helps you figure out where am I spending the most time, the most energy on which types of decisions? And most importantly, what am I sacrificing?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, we work for a reason. It's not just the paycheck, or we like to say there are things that are more important than money, but usually when we look at our behaviors, we realize, what's the line? I don't know if it was W.H. Auden, or, but there's a lot of different quotes. And one of them is, is what you do speak so loudly, I can barely hear what you're saying. And so it's the actions speak louder than words. So people aren't looking for personality tests that tell them who they are necessarily, because those tests would say that you can't change who you are. This is your personality. These are your values. But a behavioral test, most people want different outcomes. And the only way you can change your outcomes is to change your behaviors.
Absolutely.
So changing the behaviors starts with changing your perspective. How are you looking at your behaviors? How are you looking at your trade-offs? If you don't understand why you keep doing something, it's harder to make changes if you don't know what it is that you're doing that you need to change.
Right.
So that perspective starts there. It just starts with looking in, so that you have some idea, where the hell am I? What kinds of decisions am I making? What is the dominant voice in my head that I may not even be aware of? It's not a preference, it's a domination. And, for example, some people make money decisions. You're an eagle if money is your highest score. It could be because you just love money, but it could also be because you grew up poor. And it might be if you grew up really poor and you didn't have much. I can remember asking this woman, Monica, who said, I'm not an eagle, I'm a penguin. I think your test is crap. And when I asked her, well, can I ask you some personal questions? She said, yes. And I asked, where did you grow up? And she said she grew up south of the Rio Grande in Texas, which is, a place where the peso is taken and Spanish is spoken. And there's a lot of folks who have moved here. And I said, oh, so you grew up with money? Knowing the answer was not that. She said, no, I had 6 siblings and we lived in a double wide trailer. I said, so when was the last time you spent money without having great guilt or without wondering what else you could spend the money on? And she said, the next time will be the first. And so I said, okay, so instead of saying money is the most important thing to you, what if I said money is a dominant voice that's tripping in your ear or in your head and you can't avoid it? Because it always has a seat at the table. Right. And she said, oh, then it's great. Okay, that makes sense. The test works. And so that's like, we all have a dominant voice in our head. So at least if we know what it is, what's the, the transformational lingo, you need to name it to tame it kind of a thing.
Right.
Like if you know what it is, then you can say, okay, I know the dominant voice is money because I grew up broke. I won't, I don't throw stuff away in my closet because I feel like I didn't have stuff, or, whatever the thing is. Once you know what it is, then at least you can say, okay, I know this is my tendency. So whenever I make a decision that's consistent with this tendency, I can just stop and ask myself, am I doing this for a good reason, or am I doing this out of habit? So I think that's where the perspective starts, is just understanding your natural tendencies or your unnatural tendencies, however you came there, get to that point. And like, that's a start. And very few people take this and don't have some interesting, they get a 19-page report, and, we'll make it available to everybody in your audience for free, with a code we can put in the show notes. And just because I think it's good for people to have that perspective. It's hard to talk about it and then not give people a path to figuring it out.
Right, right. So do you think most people are chasing the wrong version of success then?
I think most people are living in the weeds. So we talk about in the book the difference between the zebra, which is eating leaves, versus, the giraffe is eating leaves, the zebra is eating weeds. Is, I think people tend to get on autopilot, and it's not because they're dumb. It's not because they don't care. I think it's just the nature of, we have a lot of things going on. I think the Greeks created the word priori, which was, the priority was a first thing, and somehow, typical as Americans, we created priorities and made it plural.
Right.
And so how can you have multiple priorities? You have something that comes first. Second thing isn't first. And so
Absolutely.
and so I think most people get caught in the day of, oh, I have stuff to do. And so it's natural when you're, I guess, walking down a path is, oh, here's the first obstacle. Let me move this rock out of the way. And so when we have a lot of things on our plate, we don't think about, why are we even on this path to begin with? And what's the big picture? So we get caught up in to-do lists. And I was that way for sure. Before I started working with Jack Canfield, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul. This was many years ago. And it was that I used to just beat myself up because my to-do list would never be done.
Right.
And I realized that as an entrepreneur, it's never going to be done. Like the things that you could do or should do are endless. And so, I think, long-windedly, to answer your question, I think the problem is that most people get caught up in the lists of the things to do and the endorphin rush that we get from checking something off the list, which is why all these apps on the phone with all the endorphin rush, with the little wins and the little gamification and the notifications and the likes and the views and the follows, is all feeding our brain and causing us to get lost. We just lose track of, why am I doing this again?
Right. Right. Yeah, I know Stephen Covey talks about that, right? In the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, in the quadrant, right? You really need to be, the priority is quadrant 2, but then you have quadrant 1 that constantly pulls you back, like you're talking about other people, Facebook, notifications coming in, things like that, right? So, again, we think we're busy, but again, what is the priority? What is the very first thing that needs to be done? Once that's accomplished, what's the next step in, what is the next priority? Not having 17 different priorities, right?
Yeah, well, like you said about the Covey is, for people who aren't familiar, that I think most people live in the urgent but unimportant.
Right.
Something that needs to get done because it's, I can do this quickly. So, the book, The One Thing, I thought was great, which can really be simplified to, what is the one thing on your list that if you were to do it, it would make everything else on the list less important or completely unnecessary.
Right.
And like, if you told me that you and your wife wanted to move to Mexico and start a business there, and you wanted to live in Baja California, then learning Spanish would probably be a useful thing. But on your list of things to do today, learn Spanish is not one that you can check off.
Correct.
Right? You can't. Unlikely, even if with the new app Parrot, which is fantastic, and I met the founder, like, you're not going to learn it in a day. So we tend to put off the thing that we can't put off because we want to check as many boxes as we can, which is human nature, but it's a fault. It's definitely a problem. What you should do is make sure, like they did teach you in the One Thing book, that, well, you should spend at least 2 hours a day working on your Spanish. If that's important to you, just put 2 hours in to the thing that's first. And after a while, after 6 months, hey, you're doing pretty well. You're 360 hours into learning Spanish. Like, you're doing muy bueno, right? You're doing better. So, but that's the thing, is we get so caught up in the checking the box, again, the urgent and unimportant versus the urgent and important is obviously, the place you want to spend your time, or even the important and non-urgent is probably more important, right? The thing that's really important but doesn't have to get done now, we let little things get in the way and we get derailed with, I got to return this note. Why? Like, why do you need to return that email? Why do you have to return that text? Why do you have, why?
Right this very second. Exactly.
Right. At all. I mean, I learned from Tim Ferriss, one of the best things I got out of the 4-hour work week was to turn notifications off. And so, like, you and I have some of the same clients and serve some of the same people and work with some of the same people. And whenever I go to a sales conference and I tell people that I turned my phone off 12 years ago, 10 years ago, they said, what do you mean you turn your phone off? I said, my phone hasn't rung in 10 years. They said, it vibrates. I was like, it doesn't vibrate. It goes to your watch. It does not go to my watch. So how do you know when you get a call? Well, if it's open and I'm looking at it, I'll see it. If not, they'll leave a message. How do you know when you get a text? I get it when I look at it. When do you look at it? Well, when I'm not on a call, when I'm not on a podcast, when I'm not in a conversation, when I'm not writing a note or writing an article or doing research, I look at it when I get around to it. They said, well, that would never work for me. My clients would never stand for that. It's like, my clients are all 7 and 8 figure earners, or people worth tens or hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars. Like, I work for a family office. None of the clients aren't successful, but they appreciate that you're successful. And there's something to not being available all the time for every distraction. It's really hard to get something done, whether it's crafting an email or writing a book, or if we had to do this podcast and we did it in 12 5-minute segments, it would be horrible.
Right.
Like, you don't get any flow. And so you have to get into the flow of a conversation, a dialogue, a thought process. Like the brain, now it's something like with all the, I think now the statistics are something like 27 minutes for the brain to get back on task after you're distracted.
Well, that seems about right.
It used to be 17, I think, was the statistic. But the point is, it just takes time to get back into the frame of mind when you're in the middle of something. So that whole being in the moment and being present in whatever you're doing allows you to get more done. And I think, unfortunately, the phone is killing us, and social media is killing us with distraction.
Yeah.
It just is. It's one of those things that we can't get much done. And there's nothing more insulting than being mid-conversation and having somebody get distracted and look at their phone or look at their watch or look at, right? It really is horrible.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, unacceptable. When I teach classes and kids get on their phones, like, I'm a kind and generous teacher, but when there's a phone thing, there's a moment in every class when they're like, I didn't see that coming from him. I'm like, yeah, because I'm trying to teach the lesson of, like, you've got to respect people, and it starts with not letting electronics derail you from the human connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I know that's one of the things that, that we do as part of our MEO meetings, right? Massively improving outcomes is, you cannot have a distraction in the room. When we're in there, we're in the war room, if you will. We're strategizing, we're planning, we're, getting things done. And then that's the worst thing is you look and you got somebody over here. It's like, nope, no phones are allowed in the conference room. So
that's great. Good for you. Because a lot of people won't do that.
Right.
Because they think there's something else. And it really is. People understand, successful people understand and appreciate that you're busy. Like, they really do. It's like somebody who doesn't get that. I mean, we're not all doing heart surgery or brain surgery, literally, but you just have to have some attention.
Absolutely.
And once you do it, it is liberating to not be on your phone. I mean, it's just such a great, I mean, the number of times that like taking kids on vacation and you go somewhere where they're now it's getting harder and harder, but we used to be able to go places where there was no service.
Right.
When we go to a friend's lake house, there was no service. It was the greatest gift because you just couldn't, you had to interact.
It was in SOS mode. There's no signal coming in, no signal going out. It's you are present.
That's right. You're playing Uno and you're or Connect Four, or you're just having a conversation, or whatever it is. Like just be human and get away from. So I think that's, it's amazing, these little things. It's painful. It is painful and sad that some of these little interpersonal things that we learned literally in kindergarten, right? You went to school for the first time to interact with people and get some social skills, or pre-K or whatever it was called, nursery school at the time, back in our day. And now we have to relearn these skills.
Yep.
Crazy.
Absolutely. It definitely has changed over several different decades, especially when the cell phone became very prevalent, not even with the cell phone at that point in time, right? Because there was nothing on it other than like Snake back in the day, right? But now, you can go to Facebook, you can look on all the webs, I mean, it's just extremely distracting. So 100% agree with you on that one. Now, you've helped families build and protect significant wealth. What separates those who keep it versus lose it?
I'd say intention and design. I'm working on a book that the byline is, we haven't figured out a title, but the subtitle is From Soulless Success to Intentional Impact. And it's such an important, it came out of this ultra high net worth wealth report that we just finished, that'll be released next week, that we took 34 reports of family offices and wealthy families and all the questions and the concerns and everything else that they have going on. And what we learned was that, like, the big takeaway is that when you make money or you have a big exit, that's not the end of the game. Like, that's actually the beginning of the problem.
Right.
Because managing wealth and managing teams and managing expectations and managing relationships is a lot of work. And like, people work so hard to get money. And what's the stat? Like 3% of businesses that are formed will ever sell. 90% of people who sell regret it within the first year or the first 2 years. And 95% of families that have a big liquidity event lose it by generation 3.
Right.
So for the love of God, we kill ourselves as entrepreneurs. Few of us will ever sell. And then those who do, very few ever keep it. So the question you're asking is looking at a very small percentage of people. And I would say the ones who do plan ahead. So they build their strategy long before the exit. They communicate well. So people know why they're doing the thing that they're doing. It's not just about the money. I'd say the ones who build substantial wealth and keep it have a plan that what they want the money to be used for. And they're happy to communicate that. So it's not every single family I've ever worked with, and I've worked with thousands now at this point. And only, 6 or 7 billionaire families. It's not a lot. So I don't pretend that that's a space I spend a ton of time in, but I've been there more than a few times. Communicating what we have, why we have it, what we went through to get it is very important. And most families have resisted having that conversation. But when they finally come around to it, I'll do a check after and say, how'd that go? How are you feeling now that you've, kind of let the genie out of the bottle, so to speak? Every single one has said, I wish we had done it sooner. I wish we had talked about it. It just talked about what we have and what the purpose of it is.
Right.
Versus I don't want the kids to feel entitled. Like, you just took them to Mallorca for a vacation. Like, I think they know you're not broke.
Right.
Like, they may not have, a lot of the kids have no idea how much money you have, but like, kids who've seen the world and been places, like, there's some sense of, okay, like, not, they realize that not everybody when I was 9, like
Right.
for 5 days, and it was freezing in January, and my dad was so pissed because it was 50 degrees in Florida and he had to buy sweatshirts for everybody, which we didn't have in the budget. Like $50 times 7 people like that, because he brought his mother in, or 6 people. Like, it's hard. Like, not everybody gets to, some people take the family truckster and they go to the local national park or campground. Like, not everybody flies to resorts around the world and gets to have these Instagrammable moments. So I think the kids know there's some money, they just don't know how much. And they certainly don't know what you went through to get it.
Right.
And so that's a big part of some of the stuff we do with our families is I had a TV show for a while, and like now I'm using the same skills from the Be the Giraffe TV show just to interview patriarchs and matriarchs to talk about the journey and to talk about how they built their money and what they went through, so that when you go visit grandma's beach house in Destin, or you go to the ski resort in Vail or whatever else, you can appreciate the fact that grandma was a badass. Like,
right.
She ran a business in the 60s when women weren't given a lot of respect. Like, she put up with a lot of crap. Like, she was tough.
Yeah.
Right. Tough to be a female, business owner because her husband died and she had to take it over, and everybody treated her like crap, and the sexual harassment, and the bank not giving her a loan because she was a woman. Like, just stupid. But those are stories that people are like, wow, like, yeah, you just know grandma as the old lady who, makes cookies.
Is doing well. Yeah.
Right. Like, yeah, like that's, but those stories are important to tell. So I think again, long-windedly, the answer with the ones who make it are the ones that have a plan, and the ones that are willing to communicate, not just like how much money they have, but like, what is the purpose of the money and the expectation. And they're willing to have that conversation. Mm-hmm. I think that's the biggie. Like, design, super important, and communication, like those two things together work really well, because design is super important. It's what I get paid to do. But I keep pushing people that if you don't talk about it, this thing is going to break down at scale, or it's going to break down if you don't communicate like the rules behind it. Like, people want to know the intention, not just what does the trust say I have access to? No, how about why does the trust say that? What is it that the person who set it up was thinking?
Yep.
What they want you to have some money to do certain things, but want you to take some risk too. Why can't I get the money before this age? Because they want you to go out and learn and struggle a little bit before. Then you'll appreciate the gift because you know how hard it was to live without it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the things, we always talk about is financial literacy. Most recently, I was in San Juan. I gave a talk on, are you engineering a legacy, or are you building a sandcastle? That kind of, it has different perspective, right? And so ultimately, building that, or engineering or designing, like you're saying, that legacy, what does that look like? How do we want that to be handled long term? Because without that, those conversations, which, in speaking with a lot of our clients, they come from kind of that old school family, right? Where we didn't talk about money. We're doing fine. But, then they're left with a big gift basket. And what we've typically seen is, now they have no financial literacy. They have no direction, no design process, like you're saying, of how to continually grow that money. They just go blow it, right? And then, here, we're going to go buy a 10,000 square foot mansion and a $400,000 Lambo. And oh, now all of a sudden I don't have any money to put gas in the tank or pay the property taxes or turn on the lights, right? So, I mean, that's a huge factor. And definitely that's one of my core missions. I know it is yours as well, is, engineer with intention, right? And then bring whomever along, whomever that is going to go to, whether it's, if you don't have kids, whether that's a niece or nephew, maybe a brother or sister, or if it is your kids, this is how we're going to continue operating it. And the beautiful thing about designing the legacy is, as you were talking about, doing a structured payout, right? That's the beautiful thing about trust, is that they're not going to get the whole gift basket all at once. They're going to get it at staggered stages in life, so that, yes, you're going to do okay. If something happens to me, you're going to do okay, but you're not going to get it all right then. Right? You might get it at 25, 30, 35, maybe 30, 35, and 40, but again, it's all designing with intention. So 100%. Now, have you ever built something that looked right on paper but didn't feel right in reality?
Other than all my businesses, um, have I ever built something that looked good on paper but didn't feel right? I think I have two answers to that. One, I tell clients I've done about 2,000 plans for people over the last 30 years. And I tell them that none of them have ever gone to term.
Hmm.
Like none have ever lasted. And I don't say it to point out how bad I am, but rather I share that to point out how much I value flexibility
Mhm.
in planning because I know it's going to change. Like back to that story of as an entrepreneur, your day never goes according to plan. Most entrepreneurs I know, and the ones that I actually surveyed for one of my books, more than 90% of an entrepreneur's day is spent doing stuff they didn't intend to do, is the number I get, right? They come in, they something they want to do today, really important. They want to work on this new opportunity or this acquisition or a new book or whatever it is, something big and strategic. And you get in and all hell breaks loose and the day gets lost. Like your day gets lost. You don't lose your day in the afternoon. You lose your day like at 9:15.
Mhm.
And so I'd say most plans that I design are wrong because we just need flexibility in them because we don't know what life's going to throw at us. But I will say, now that I've been kind of stalling to get to the second one, it's become really clear. The second way I'd answer that is another survey I did of my clients, successful clients, I think for the Giraffe Money book or the Six Secrets book. I asked them, how many times have you sacrificed a rule that you set for yourself? So you set a rule, I won't work with these type of people, I won't work with this industry, I won't work for this type of back end deal, whatever it was. Have you ever made a concession for money? And every one of the people I asked said, yes, of course. There was a deal that was just too good, too big. So I decided to bend my own rules that I had for myself. And then I asked, and I've done this myself on more than one occasion, not recently, thankfully. Maybe I'm learning. Is I said, okay, you made a concession for money. You bent the rules because the money was so good. What I found was that two things were always the case. When you make a concession for money, two things from all my surveys have come true in every one of those scenarios. First, it's never as much money as you thought.
Hmm.
So somebody just promised you this great opportunity. It just seems so good that you were willing to put maybe some integrity or maybe just some preferences to the side, some guardrails to fit it in. It was never as much money as you want. And more importantly, it was way more struggle, pain, frustration than you ever could have feared. So again, when you make a concession for money, the clients I asked who are more successful than I am had the same experience I did, which is when we make concessions for money, because it just is too much money too big of an opportunity not to try. It was never as much money as we hoped, and it was always more BS than we ever could have imagined.
Hmm.
So I think that's when we do things for money, when money becomes the thing that overrides all of our other sensibilities and our feelings and I think about the time we did something. Oh, I don't want to miss the kids' school play, but this is really an important call, or it's a meeting I got to take, or it's like as soon as we make sacrifices, it's very seldom does money pay us back
Right.
in those other areas of life. So I think the answer to that is when I get, have I ever made a decision that looked good? It's like, yeah, on paper, this was all this money, which would give me all this freedom and all this whatever, whether it's a launching pad or it's freedom or it's an exit or whatever it was. I sold the company and I sold it so I could pay back my investor everything he gave me plus $1 million because he was there for me when I talked about being 41 and being homeless and suicidal and I was in a terrible place and I had somebody stand up and give me a lot of money without even asking so I could find a place to live and get my life on track and start a company. And so I wanted to pay him back. So I was looking for a buyer. And I sold it to somebody, and I had some reservations. And that first meeting, the onboarding meeting and moving the companies together, I was, the hell did I just do?
Right.
And I ended up spending 4.5 years in federal court and over $800,000 in legal bills trying to get the money I was owed. And it was like, all right, this one bit me in the, we'll call that life tuition, right? You pay a lot of money to learn a lesson that I won't make that mistake again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's, again, another long-winded answer, but it's the money feeling of it papers out and it looks good, but somewhere in your heart or somewhere in your soul, it feels wrong. If it does, you got to take that. You got to listen to your voice. I work with a family now that they have a 1-no rule. If it's family money, it only takes one person in the family to say no. Which I just heard that last week. From, shout out to Candace for giving me that one. She's like, yeah, we have a 1-no rule. If one person in the family says no, then family money will not go into the deal. And like, you could put your own individual money if you want to do that, and you have some, you can do it. But they just said 1 no. One person just says, this doesn't feel right. That's enough, because you don't want to have that. Because for them, family harmony is more important than returns.
Right.
So they don't want to go into something where someone's like, I knew this guy was bad, or I had a bad feeling. It's like, all right, no, we value that. So that's great. We just won't. We need unanimous decisions on how we invest. And that crosses generations too. So it's not like one vote at the parent level. It's parent and kids. Like if you're an adult, you got to vote.
Absolutely.
So,
well, and this kind of ties in. So when you think about legacy, what does that actually mean beyond money? I mean, it is kind of tying right into this conversation of, is it the money? Is it, what's best for the family? I mean, that's really it, right?
Yeah, well, that is the question. I have a managing director title, but the area that I oversee is capital strategy. And people tend to think that means, how are we deploying capital? Are you talking to the bank? It's not a CFO conversation. The most important capital is human capital. And at the end of the day, like, yeah, the money has to be structured. And I majored in math and have a degree in finance and master's degree. And I know how to move numbers around, but the piece that's most important is the human capital. At the end of the day, what is the purpose of the money? I cannot tell you how frustrating it is. And this is a true story. I have a client who, we did the math. How much money do you need to do everything your heart ever desired? Take care of your kids, grandkids, college, weddings, first job, first house, whatever you decide you want to do, it's your money. I try not to judge. And we came up with a number that 40 million would be enough. And we figured that was a reasonable number. I said, okay, great. I'm going to give you 50. So I'm assume we're off, and we'll put a $10 million buffer off into 5% triple tax-free muni bonds. And they're like, well, that sounds pretty conservative. Okay, great. They had a chance to sell some real estate they had for $80 million. And I said, oh, so we're selling? They're like, no, why not? Because it's worth 100. We've already won the game now.
Twice over.
But even with the 80, if you paid 25% tax on it, you're still ending up with 60, and they still had some money before they sold from the money they made. So it's like, you already have more than you need, but you get caught up in I don't want to lose the transaction. Right. So that's I don't want to sell something for 80 that's worth 100. Like, well, first of all, you inherited it, so you really didn't build this. Second, it's more than you need, but the number of people who get caught up in trying to win the transaction without trying to win the day, right? Like, you want to win at the game of life. You don't want to win every day, every argument, right? We've all, like, you get in an argument with your significant other, who wins, right? Like, you're really going to push to say the thing that wins the argument, and then, like, perhaps irreparably hurt the relationship.
Right.
Like, nobody wins. Like, I was reminded of that today. Like, oh, right. Like, who are you arguing with and why? And what's, at the end of the day, what's most important? So I think with this legacy thing, why are we doing the things that we do? What are the things that are important to us? And then once you identify what's important, then you put rules in place, and the rules can be revisited, but they get revisited when the people who are involved, the stakeholders, the family members, decide, oh, this thing is no longer important to us anymore. It's not because I don't like the rule. It's is the intention of the rule being met? And so, because in a company, if you and I are up for the CEO role at Harris and you get the job and we're both around the same age, I'm going to leave and go somewhere else because we're about the same age. I won't have a chance to get that job anymore. So if I want to become CEO, I leave. And that's what happens, right? The 2 or 3 or 4 finalists that are up for a job, somebody gets it, and then everybody else leaves the company because their path isn't there to get that role. But in a family, if dad picks you and doesn't pick me and we're brothers, I don't get to leave and find another family. Like
That's
this
true.
is still the family, but now I got to take instruction and direction from my younger brother. And so like there is a depth to why are we doing this? It's not just, hey, it's business, it's not personal. When a family business, it's always personal. You can't pull that apart. So I think for legacy, at the end of the day, the idea that it's business, it's not personal, there's always persons involved, and you've got to take that into consideration. So legacy, I think, is I just heard Chris Jarvis, a good friend of mine, and he runs a $12-20 billion family office, and he's a lawyer, director of a major law firm. He's super successful and very humble and very wise. And he just, he's got a strong faith. And he said, I want to be able to, at the end of the day, realize that someday I'm going to talk to somebody or something, and I'd like to be able to answer the question, if I'm posed with you were given extraordinary gifts and you were lucky to have them, what did you do with them? Like, did you make people's lives better with the gifts I gave you? And some people use it with a God or a universe context. Other people, the other one is, could you proudly tell your mother what you did today? Like, so who is, or would your kids, if they knew how you made the decision and what decision you made, would they be proud of you? And so it's not saying that you need external validation, but the point would be, why are we doing things? And are these things that will guide people and that will impress the people we want to impress? Right? I got great advice once, only seek the praise of the praiseworthy. Because if you try to impress everybody, you'll try to impress a lot of, like, who are you impressing? Social media? Like, who cares?
Right.
But the people you care about, if the people you respect you, that's probably more important than the people who don't know you judging you. So, that legacy thing again is, what do you want your legacy? Realizing 100 years after you go, no one will have any memory of you whatsoever. What was the time worth? And did your kids and possibly your grandkids remember you well? And did your grandkids and great grandkids have values did they value things that were important to you? So did your success and your wealth create opportunities and infrastructure and that would help them to become the best versions of themselves? To me, that's the legacy piece, is did what you did allow people to be better human beings? Like, just give them an opportunity to be better at whatever that is.
Right.
Like that's and the reason why the program we have for families is called 4 Legacy. It's the 4 legs of the giraffe, the number 4 legacy. Like it's my newest thing that I'm so excited about, is what in God's name are we doing this for? And once we know what that is, then you can ask yourself with every project, is this thing in front of me is this moving me toward or away from whatever I want my legacy to be?
Right.
And I don't care what somebody's mission is. You might want to save the whale, you may want to save the tree, you want to save the rainforest. I honestly don't care. Like, if you have a passion about it, you were given that passion. Passion's deep in your heart. You don't get to choose the things you're passionate about. You can try, but like an authentic passion, when somebody's really into something, you can tell.
Absolutely.
And if that's what you care about, if it's getting kids out of sex trafficking or out of, enslavement, or it's teaching people how to work, or it's helping widows, or it's okay. Like, all of it's great. Like, whatever it is that gets you fired up, let's try to finance your dreams and make that happen with structures that work. But if you know what that thing is and why it's there, like, we can all have different views, but when someone tells you their story, when was the last time somebody told you something they were excited about? You're like, that doesn't sound that interesting. And then you hear their story like, oh, now I get it.
Yeah, now it makes sense.
Yeah, now it makes sense. Like I just met a 22-year-old kid who's solving a health problem that kills millions of people every year. And he's got the Mayo Clinic. He's working with them. He's 22 years old. And he's doing this because his mom died of this disease. And he just got fired up. And Josh Hansen is doing cool stuff. And that's like, dude, you're 22 years old. Holy cow. Like he's driven by the fact that he lost his mom.
Right. And
you just find, so not everybody has that thing, but or you see a motivational speaker, you're like, wow, I get why you do this. This isn't an ego trip for you to get on stage and get the big standing ovation. It's like you went through some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, near-death experience and, cancer survivor who was in a coma for a year getting chemo from 16 to 17 and then decides I'm going to climb Mount Everest and do all the summits and do the North and South Pole. And I'm going to do it to just inspire other people affected by cancer that they can do anything.
Right.
Like, dude, how do I not support that guy? Right. Like you just get behind like, okay, cool. Like you want people to hear these stories. And so again, for legacy, not every one of us needs to have that experience. You don't need to have trauma on such a high level, I think, but as long as there's a purpose and a mission behind it, to your point, I love the legacy engineered because its legacy is what are you going to leave when you're gone?
Correct.
And upon legacy, most people don't think about little change. They think about big change. So what would you like to see better in the world? And engineering is I'm going to take the time to think about and design and constantly adjust what I'm doing to fix it, right? The engineer was Scotty in Star Trek. Like, I'm going to constantly tweak this thing to make it a little more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to crack and break like everything that we make does. I'm going to give it some attention. What's that? Attention and intention. Attention creates all the, energy. Attention creates the energy and the focus, and intention creates the direction. Like,
correct.
Great. Let's get that attention and intention flying. And then we can have a legacy that's engineered.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Chris, I really appreciate this conversation. What stands out is the shift in perspective, not just to build more, but to build better and more intentionally. That's really what this show's about, right? And so stepping back and asking if what you're building actually aligns with your life, the life you want and the legacy you're creating. And I know that you're working on that report. I know you had mentioned it a little bit earlier in our conversation here, but if you want to tell our listeners a little bit more about that, and then we can attach the link. And if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. The Giraffe Money 2026 Ultra High Net Worth Wealth Report. We took 34 reports from banks and insurance companies and family office service centers and universities and the Wharton Business School. There are 34 different reports. They all have a different take on what very wealthy people are doing. What are they worrying about? What trends are they noticing? And we took all those reports that went through tens of millions of people, tens of thousands of families rather. And we created one report that outlines the 13 top trends and things you need to be thinking about. So it's some of it is where money is going, but a lot of it is how are people designing things? What are they worrying about? How is the world changing? And what do you need to do if you'd like to build and maintain substantial wealth and have a life of intentional impact? So that report is about to be released next week. So sometime here in April, people will be able to buy that. We'll make it free for everybody in the audience, and we'll have a link. You probably can find it on giraffemoney.com, but we'll also have it. We'll put the link in the show notes with a code so that everybody who's listening can get this for free. And it's a report that has, again, lots of interesting stuff that you'll kind of get an idea of. If you have a ton of money, it'll speak directly to you. But if you want to build a lot of wealth, you should look at the people who have more wealth and what are they thinking about, because they're a little bit further ahead. Mm-hmm. So it's good to know what they're
learn
If
from
if the wealthiest people in town are selling all their real estate, it's probably not a good time for you to buy real estate. as an example,
don't go buy up their whole portfolio because they're dumping it. Exactly.
That's exactly right. Like you're not going to do well with the buy high, sell low strategy. So so the ultra high net worth report is a great gift. And then for your own personal journey, we'll make the wild factor available too. We'll put the link and a code in the show notes so that if you want to take that yourself and share it with your family, share it with your partner, share it, we'll make that free too. So a couple gifts that, normally are $20.
We appreciate
but
that.
You can do some, you can, again, this is all about perspective. So I can't prophesize the importance of elevating perspective and then create roadblocks. So it's my job to knock those down and give people every opportunity. So the wow factor will help them see if they're an eagle, elephant, monkey, dolphin, or penguin. You have to take it to find out what that means and get a 19-page customized report. And you get the 105-page ultra high net worth wealth report. So you can get an idea of these are all quotes from other reports from other institutions. Some of my comments are in there, my takeaways, but those are it's obvious where my opinion is, but all the data is in there with sources and pages and footnotes. And so you'll see where it's coming from.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it, definitely. And for those listening, if you do want a copy of that report, as Chris said, we'll go ahead and put that in the show notes. And if any of you want to connect with Chris and explore more of his work, contact our team at Controllers. We'd be happy to make the introduction. And as always, are you building something temporary or are you engineering a legacy? Again, thanks, Chris, for joining us today.
Thank you, Scott. This was a ton of fun.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to Legacy Engineered. For more episodes and to connect with Scott and the team at Controllers Limited, visit controllersltd.com. You can also follow Scott on Instagram and LinkedIn and start building your legacy with confidence today.